Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the show that takes these really dense, sometimes really out there source materials, and we just try to pull out the absolute core of it.
So you can feel, completely in the loop.
And for today's deep dive, I think you might want to hold on to something solid.
If you can find anything that actually is solid, that is.
Exactly, because we are starting with a premise that is it's so radical, it's so completely against everything we're taught about the physical world that mind-bending honestly doesn't even begin to cover it. So just for a second, I want you to get comfortable. Look around you, maybe look at the floor or, the chair you're sitting on. Maybe you have a cup of coffee next to you.
Yeah.
Now, what if I told you that that object, that solid, stable, reassuring thing is actually disappearing and reappearing, completely new, millions of times every single second?
That the actual physical stuff you were touching a moment ago, it's gone. It's been entirely replaced by a perfect, instantaneous copy.
It's not science fiction. This is the bedrock of the metaphysical system we're getting into today.
It really is a deep dive into, I guess, the underlying physics of consciousness. And we're pulling this directly from one of the most paradigm-shifting texts of the modern era.
Our main source for all of this comes directly from session 60 of the early sessions, book 2 of the Seth material.
And this was recorded on Monday, June 8, 1964.
That date is so important because these are ideas that mainstream science is still just, barely starting to touch on today, decades later.
So our mission here is to really unpack Seth's claims. The idea that matter isn't continuous, that aging is basically an illusion.
And this idea of a truly astounding cooperation that's happening just beneath the surface of what we see.
We're all living things, all of us, are constantly pumping psychic energy into reality just to hold the universe together.
We're basically giving you the shortcut to understanding the blueprint of existence itself. And as we always do, we want to be very clear that this deep dive is being distributed completely free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
These ideas are they're too foundational, too important to put behind any kind of paywall.
Okay, so before we jump into the physics-defying stuff, we have to talk about the session itself.
Right, the mechanics of it, because how the information came through tells you a lot about the intensity of what was being said.
The human element here is just fascinating. We know from the notes that Ruburt, that's the name Seth used for Jane Roberts, the medium, she started the session somewhat nervous.
Which, who wouldn't be? You're about to channel information that rewrites reality.
But her husband, Joseph, who was taking the notes, he observed that she was less unsettled than before. So she was getting used to it. She was adapting to this immense energetic load.
But here's the really telling detail. Even though she was adapting, her actual delivery got almost painfully slow.
Painfully slow.
Joseph's note says she gave the impression of searching carefully for just the right word. This wasn't her being hesitant. This was an intense effort of translation.
I just get this image of like an old dial-up modem trying to download a massive file of cosmic data.
Yes.
The information is coming through, but the process of converting it into human language, into words we can understand, is just grinding. It's so slow because the precision was so important.
And Seth actually mentions this right at the start of the session. He talks about some minor distortions they'd had before in more personal material, and he says, don't worry, those can be cleared up later.
But then he makes this crucial distinction.
He says the general material, the kind of stuff we're talking about today, is very seldom blocked or distorted. He was basically saying, pay attention. This part is pure.
And then you get this moment of incredible, almost human courtesy from this non-physical entity.
Right.
He says he feels he should apologize to Ruburt for pushing more through than he was willing to receive.
It's like your boss apologizing for giving you too much overtime, except the work here is channeling the fundamental laws of the universe through your consciousness.
It just really underlines that this wasn't a passive thing. It was a conscious, cooperative, and incredibly strenuous effort. Jane wasn't just a phone line.
Not at all. She was an active translator, and her own mind was being pushed to its absolute limit to maintain the accuracy of this. I mean, it's highly technical, radical information. She was basically co-authoring it in real time.
Which has to be completely exhausting.
So Seth establishes right away that this kind of work, it needs more than just, sitting in a chair and letting words pour out.
Right. It actually requires intellectual prep work, which for a channeled work is pretty unusual, isn't it?
It's very unusual. He wasn't looking for an empty vessel. He immediately brings up that Jane has started reading a book on the nature of matter. And he says, this is to the good.
So he's giving her a gold star for doing her homework.
Pretty much. He lays out this really strict expectation. He says, you are both expected to keep up intellectually.
It's almost funny, the image of a trance medium having to go to the library to brush up on her physics and philosophy just to keep the channel clear.
He even warns Ruburt, that she would find herself reading books on quite bizarre subjects. It's like he's saying, look, where we're going, you're going to need a bigger vocabulary.
So why was that so important? Why the intellectual prep?
It was about the methodology. Seth says he preferred working with as much cooperation on your parts as possible. He explains that if they were using a very deep trance state, then the conscious knowledge wouldn't really matter.
But they weren't.
They weren't. So the conscious mind had to be ready for an assimilation of knowledge by the whole self.
Okay, so if the conscious part of your brain has at least a basic familiarity with concepts like energy fields or the nature of matter, it just reduces the friction.
Exactly. It stops the conscious mind from throwing up a huge roadblock and shouting, wait a minute, that's impossible, that breaks the laws of physics.
It's like preloading the software. You're giving the brain the tools it needs to process the incoming data without rejecting it as total nonsense.
You are. You're preparing the entire system to handle ideas that fundamentally contradict its baseline programming about reality.
And this wasn't just for their own private study group. Seth states very clearly this involves a lifetime's work and that the material will be published.
Yeah, he's basically laying out a long-term plan, saying this will become the foundation for Jane's own future writings.
Yeah.
He's declaring major historical and literary intent right there in Session 60.
So the stakes are high from the very beginning.
Extremely high.
Yeah.
And after setting those ground rules, work hard, read weird books, this is your life's work, he transitions. He just lays out the curriculum for what Session 60 is meant to introduce.
And it is. It's a breathtaking syllabus, really.
It is.
Governed by these cold, impersonal laws, right? Gravity, thermodynamics.
Exactly. But Seth is suggesting the complete opposite. He's saying the fact that reality persists at all is an active, ongoing, energetic achievement.
And it requires constant psychic fuel from every single living thing, from a microbe to a person.
I have to stop you there because that completely reframes our idea of individual importance. We're not just, passengers along for the ride in some pre-built universe.
We are essential workers.
We are. Every single one of us right now, listen to this, is unconsciously dedicating a part of our psychic energy just to keep the chair from dissolving.
This idea of astounding cooperation, it makes reality sound like a massive collective psychic construction project that's happening all the time.
And that leads to the most electrifying part of the whole thing. Seth says right now, we do this unconsciously.
But he predicts that mankind, if we follow through, will become consciously aware of his own part in this continual creation of matter.
And then be able to do it in a much more intelligent manner.
Okay, that's the leap. From being an unconscious cog in the machine to a conscious architect of reality.
It's a move from metaphysics straight into, reality-bending capability.
Imagine a world where people stop unconsciously feeding their energy into patterns of sickness or decay or conflict.
And instead consciously focus that energy on patterns of health, of stability, of creativity. The potential is just staggering. But first, we have to understand the mechanics.
Okay, so let's get into those mechanics. Let's unpack the absolute core definition from Session 60 that makes all of this possible.
This is where Seth starts, by completely redefining the most basic thing we deal with every day, physical matter.
He just immediately strips it of all its permanence, doesn't he? The fundamental point he makes is that matter is not what we think it is.
Not even close. He says it is merely energy changed into aspects with certain properties that can, under certain conditions, be perceived by your senses.
So think of psychic energy as like the raw clay, the infinite source material.
And matter is just that clay being temporarily molded into a specific shape that our senses, which are also temporary shapes, can interact with. Matter is a tool, a medium. It's not the source.
So when I look at a huge, solid-looking oak tree, what I'm really perceiving is a highly specialized, dense concentration of this fundamental energy.
An energy that's interacting with your eyes and your hands in a very specific way. You're seeing the visual output. You're not seeing the underlying code that's creating it.
And that leads right into this chilling paradox. The appearance of that solid tree is not permanent.
It's only, and this is the key phrase, cohesive enough to give the appearance of relative permanence to the senses that perceive it.
So our senses are basically designed to be fooled.
Not fooled, exactly. They evolved within the system, so they are built to register the persistent pattern, not the millions of fleeting components that make it up. We are hardwired to see coherence, not the underlying discontinuity.
Hold on. If our senses are built to perceive coherence over continuity, doesn't that make the entire scientific method, which is based on observation, kind of fundamentally flawed?
It raises a huge question, doesn't it?
If the very thing we're trying to measure is an instantaneous illusion, how can we ever measure the truth of it?
Well, that's a brilliant point. Conventional physics, you could argue, measures the effect. It measures the pattern holding steady, and it develops laws based on that observation.
Right.
Seth is talking about the cause, the conscious energy that is maintaining the pattern in the first place. For us to see a chair, the pattern of chair has to hold for a certain duration, long enough for our brain to process it sequentially.
But that perception doesn't require the actual atoms of the chair to be continuous.
No, only that the pattern of energy flow that creates them is continuous.
Okay, let's get to the most radical claim then, the idea we opened with. Matter is not continuous.
It's one thing to say it conceptually, but he makes it so explicit with examples.
He's incredibly direct. He says a rock or a tree today is not at all the same tree or rock physically today that it was yesterday.
And then he brings it right into the room with you. He confirms that your chair is not the same chair, physically speaking, that it was last evening. This isn't just, a few molecules flaking off. It's total replacement.
My first thought is, okay, isn't this just like a poetic way of describing quantum mechanics? Particles winking in and out of existence in the quantum foam?
But he's talking about something much, much bigger than that. It's not just subatomic particles flickering. He is talking about the entire physical object being regenerated wholesale.
He really emphasizes that matter is continually created, but no particular physical object is in itself continuous.
It's like an infinite series of brand new, identical objects appearing in the exact same space, one after another, so fast we can't perceive the switch.
So what's governing this insane speed of replacement? Seth gives two properties that are just the complete opposite of how we usually think of matter.
Number one.
And number two, instantaneous.
Let's break those down. Spontaneous means it doesn't depend on a linear step-by-step process. It's not a chemical reaction building up over time. The matter just is. It's generated from psychic energy right now, fully formed.
But instantaneous, that's the real kicker, isn't it?
That's the one that breaks your brain. It means that no particular physical particle exists for any amount of time. It exists and disappears and is instantaneously replaced by another.
Okay, I have to pause here. If it's truly instantaneous replacement for every particle in the universe, we're talking about an energy flow of, incomprehensible scale.
Yes.
Where is all that energy coming from constantly to refresh every single atom, spontaneously, moment after moment?
And that brings us right back to the astounding cooperation. The energy source is the consciousness that underlies all existence. And that flow is channeled, it's focused, and it's maintained by the psychic energy that is contributed by every single living entity.
So we are unconsciously pouring our focused psychic energy into these patterns that define what physical reality looks like.
Yes. And the moment that focused energy is withdrawn, that instantaneous replacement just stops. The physical pattern dissolves, it returns to raw, unmanifested psychic energy.
So reality isn't some static machine that just runs on its own. It's a living, breathing, collective thought form
That is constantly being refreshed by the focused energy of all of its inhabitants. It's like an infinite, hyper-fast slideshow of replacement objects, and it's powered by our collective shared focus.
Wow. Okay, if that's true, then the very next question has to be, why doesn't it all just fall apart?
Right. If the material is flickering in and out of existence, why don't we feel like we're constantly falling through the gaps in reality?
And that's where the third essential property comes in, pattern assumption.
The savior of coherence, as you put it. Matter assumes and flows within patterns.
And these patterns must be incredibly precise, incredibly rigid to give us the stable, solid reality that we all experience.
Absolutely. The very existence of these stable patterns gives the illusion of a permanence of matter that is highly misleading. Our senses aren't lying to us. They're just prioritizing the template, the pattern, over the raw material that's constantly filling it.
So what is this pattern exactly? Seth says it's composed of psychic energy, and it continues like an afterimage.
So it's not physical, it's pure information. Pure structure, pure intention. And it originates in the conscious energy that is behind all matter.
I'm thinking of it like a movie projector.
That's a great analogy.
The light hitting the screen, that's the instantaneous matter, is constantly changing, 24 frames a second. But the story being told, the pattern, the blueprint, it stays consistent. It gives you the illusion of continuous movement.
The psychic energy is the consistent story, and the physical matter is just the transient light that's used to tell it.
So if you have a really strong psychic pattern, it acts like a super rigid mold.
Exactly. New, spontaneous material rushes in. It finds that mold, conforms to it perfectly, and for all intents and purposes, it appears to us as a solid, permanent, continuous wall.
If you have a highly detailed psychic blueprint for a concrete wall, the material will fill that blueprint perfectly, maybe for decades.
And the strength of that pattern is therefore directly proportional to how permanent the object seems to be. And this is a critical pivot point.
Why?
Because it suggests that if we can learn to influence the pattern, we can influence the permanence and the structure of matter itself. Consciousness isn't a byproduct of the brain. Consciousness is the architect that dictates the geometric structure the brain must instantaneously fill.
Okay, this model works really well for explaining stability, but it creates this huge problem when it comes to change.
Right.
If my chair is being constantly replaced by brand new, perfect material, why does my chair ever get old and break? Why does wood rot? And the big one, why do we age?
This is where Session 60 just completely dismantles our conventional ideas about entropy and decay. Seth calls things like growth and deterioration apparencies.
Well, apparencies.
They are only apparent properties of physical material. They are not inherent laws of the material itself.
So if aging isn't the material itself breaking down because the material is always new, then what is actually happening? Why does a 7-year-old body look and feel different from a 20-year-old body if the atoms in both are being constantly refreshed?
The mechanism has nothing to do with the material. It's tied directly to the psychic pattern, the blueprint, that the matter is filling.
There is no single physical object that deteriorates with age.
No.
No.
There's only a continuous recreation of psychic energy into a physical pattern. The failure isn't in the material. The failure is in the blueprint's integrity.
And the reason the pattern fails, the reason it loses integrity.
Seth is very clear. The energy behind it weakens. The physical pattern, therefore, blurs.
Oh, wow. It's like making a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy.
That is a perfect analogy. The original document is perfect. But with each successive instantaneous recreation, if the psychic energy that maintains the clarity of that template starts to lessen.
Maybe due to belief or expectation or just this idea that you have a limited life cycle.
Right. The pattern becomes less focused. The matter still rushes in to fill it, but the instruction set it's receiving is now fuzzy. It's blurred.
That is a genuinely shocking conclusion. It means that a wrinkle on my skin or, rust on a car, it's not evidence of time wearing down the physical stuff.
No, it's evidence that the psychic blueprint guiding the regeneration of that spot has become less perfect.
And we notice the difference between the current slightly blurred recreation and the previous clearer ones, and we just assume that a change has happened in one single continuous object.
But the actual material has completely disappeared many times.
So the source of decay shifts completely from, say, chemical stress to energetic focus.
Exactly. If you hold a deep, powerful belief that your body must start to decline after a certain age, your psychic energy unconsciously begins to relax its focus on the pattern of youth.
The blueprint blurs.
And the resulting physical matter, even though it's brand new and instantaneous, it just manifests that blurring as physical deterioration. The pattern failure always comes before the physical change.
This suddenly makes the different lifespans of things make sense. Why some things last longer than others. If the failure is energetic, then some patterns must just be easier to maintain than others.
Seth uses this really powerful example. He talks about why a painting, the physical pattern of a painting, may seem to, and often does, exist longer than the man who paints it.
Right. If both the painter and the painting are undergoing this constant, instantaneous material replacement, why does the painting last for centuries while the person decays in less than one?
Because the painting's pattern, its psychic blueprint, is relatively simple and rigid.
And it's also infused with this powerful, concentrated artistic intent from its creator.
And it benefits from the collective psychic focus of everyone who looks at it and appreciates it. That combined energy maintains a clear, durable pattern long after the painter's own individual psychic focus on his biological pattern starts to fade.
The human body's pattern is just infinitely more complex.
And it's subject to all these limiting beliefs about mortality, which causes the pattern to blur much more quickly. A static, simple pattern like a painting is just easier to maintain with perfect clarity over time.
So this must apply to healing, too.
Of course, when you get a cut, you're not repairing old material. You're rapidly replacing a damaged, blurred pattern with a new, coherent pattern that dictates what healthy tissue should be there.
And if that healing pattern gets disrupted, maybe by a belief that it won't heal well or just a lack of psychic focus.
A pattern stays blurred, and you get scar tissue, which is simply a less perfect recreation of the original, filling a weakened psychic pattern.
This concept is just. It's so profound. It means that matter is of itself no more continuous, no more given either to growth or age than is, say, the color yellow.
You don't ask the color yellow how old it is. It's a property of light. Matter, in this framework, is just a property of psychic energy.
Okay, so let's connect all these dots. We have the transient material, the enduring pattern, and the consciousness that's generating all of it. If matter is just fleeting energy, what gives us our identity? What makes a life?
This is where Seth goes right for the throat of scientific materialism. He says, it is not the material that composes man that gives him his identity. Identity is non-physical.
So you can't find it in the brain?
He argues that no physical structure, no combination of chemicals or nerve bundles will ever result in consciousness. It's the other way around. Consciousness is what gives meaning to the physical material and allows it to be effective in this physical field.
Consciousness is the commander, and matter is just the temporary uniform it wears.
A perfect way to put it. It means if you took every single atom from a living brain and perfectly reassembled it, the resulting object would be totally inert.
Because the consciousness, the pattern generator, isn't there.
It's absent. To explain how we grow and change through these non-continuous physical states, Seth uses this brilliant analogy from botany. He says, the seed is not the flower, and the flower is not the fruit.
They're completely distinct physical forms.
They are. So if they're distinct non-continuous forms, what connects them?
The pattern, or as Seth corrected himself, the data.
Right. The pattern contains the data for the physical material to follow. The fruit is not the result of a physical change in the flower. It's the result of a completely new pattern, a new data set, being filled by that spontaneous matter. And it's all guided by the underlying psychic impulse of the plant's life force.
And that leads to this really important term, value fulfillment.
It's a crucial concept. It's not just growth. It's the expansion and the realization of inherent potential.
So a seed contains the value, the potential of becoming a tree.
And when that value is ready to be fulfilled, the psychic energy creates the physical pattern for the tree. The tree isn't the end goal. The fulfillment of the seed's potential is the goal.
So if the continuity isn't in the material, but in the purpose, in the value fulfillment, then my identity as a person is the continuity of my purpose and my experience.
Exactly.
It's not the cells or the atoms that make up my body at any given moment. I'm a continuous stream of intention that is filling an ever-changing mold.
You are. And where does that stream of intention come from? Seth says, when you consider that behind all matter there's a conscious energy, then you will see where the pattern comes from. The consciousness is the value, and the physical form is just its temporary expression in this localized physical field.
So let's apply this to a whole lifespan. Seth calls it the process of psychic arrival into the physical field.
Right. This describes the changing intensity of the psychic focus that's required for manifestation. As an individualized psychic energy approaches our field, the beginning of a life, it first creates matter in a rather inadequate, almost plastic fashion.
This is the fetus, the rough draft.
It's plastic because the pattern is still being rapidly developed and it's not rigid yet. The energy hasn't fully committed to the density of the final adult form.
And then, as that psychic energy focuses more and more into the physical plane, the construction becomes more proficient and focused.
That's the period of growth, from infancy through adulthood. The pattern is highly detailed and it's being maintained with incredible strength and clarity.
So the definition of growth is actually value fulfillment of individualized portions of energy within the physical field.
And it's accomplished through this continuous focused construction of that energy into matter. The infant is not the adult. They are successive, completely replaced physical forms governed by an increasingly focused, value-driven pattern.
Seth ties this all together with the beam analogy, which is just beautiful.
It's perfect. Creation is continuous, like an endless series of beams of energy.
He says they are at first weak as they are far off. That's the fetus, the initial kind of plastic formation.
Then they become stronger. That's the peak focus and clarity of the pattern in the adult form.
Yeah. And finally, they become weak again as they pass away, which is our process of deterioration and death.
It's not that the energy is suddenly cut off. It's that the intense focus that's needed to maintain that complex physical pattern simply begins to pass beyond the effective range of our physical field.
The psychic energy is moving its attention somewhere else.
It's a completely elegant closed-loop system. Matter is the transient effect, and the focus of our individual psychic energy is the cause of everything we see: permanence, growth, and eventual dissipation. It is the ultimate statement that consciousness comes first and dictates all physical form.
Okay, so given the absolute density of that information, that we are all instantaneous, non-continuous replacement organisms powered by psychic focus, it's no wonder that transmitting session 60 was physically tough.
Oh yeah, Joseph's notes say that Jane was very tired after the second break. He could see that Seth was pushing her right to her intellectual limit.
And yet when the session finally ended, there was this feeling of release, wasn't there?
There was. She felt much better, and her quote was that she was pleasantly relaxed, she said, as one might be after a long swim.
It sounds like a really intense mental workout. It leaves you physically drained but psychically satisfied.
And Seth himself, even after completely redefining the structure of the universe, he still has his signature witty, relaxed tone.
He does. He closes with that fantastic self-aware pun. He says, "We have finally begun to get near, but hardly into, the heart of the matter." That's a pun. I enjoy such sessions.
It just shows that this profound, world-changing work doesn't have to be, grim or self-important.
And he's also practical. He tells them he would endeavor to close our sessions before 11:30 for practical reasons, so that the physical body, Jane, wasn't too tired for work the next day.
The concern for the medium's well-being was clearly a central part of this cooperative process.
Now, the ideas from session 60 and all that intellectual prep work, it seems like it directly led to a breakthrough for Joseph, the scribe.
Yes, in his own personal experiments. Right after the session, he recorded this fascinating experience he had with something called psychological time.
We should probably define that first. What is psychological time in this context?
It's basically an alternative reality framework that you can access through focused internal awareness. It's separate from the linear clock time we experience physically.
So it's a non-physical reality where interactions are based on psychic focus and intention, not on, being in the same room.
You can think of it as a very vivid, detailed, and verifiable dream state awareness, an internal consensus reality.
Okay, so Joseph enters this state, and he starts watching a scene unfold. This is the practical application of all the theory they've been discussing.
It is, and he describes the scene with such clarity. A man in a light gray business suit, brown hair, sharp nose, wearing glasses, and he's giving a lecture with a microphone.
And the topic was something about weights, and he specifically remembered the number 700 being used over and over. This isn't just a vague dream, it's specific data.
But the real breakthrough wasn't just watching, it was interaction. Joseph managed to do something he'd been trying to do for a while.
He remembered to impress his presence on the scene. He asks the man his name and age.
And the man, who was facing away from him, actually turns and replies that his name was Daniel Murphy, age 42. Joseph then introduces himself, and Murphy even repeats Joseph's name back to him. He's fully engaged in a conversation.
And this was huge because it was the first time Joseph had successfully followed Seth's advice to attempt to impress my presence upon others in this state.
He went from being a passive spectator in this psychic reality to an active participant who could initiate a two-way, data-verified exchange.
So how does this connect back to the main topic of session 60?
It shows that the intellectual work of understanding these psychic patterns was directly improving Joseph's ability to focus his own psychic energy. He was successfully projecting a clear, coherent pattern of self into the psychological field where Daniel Murphy was.
So it reinforces the whole idea. Consciousness is a powerful directive force that creates manifestation.
Whether that manifestation is physical matter or an independently verified conversation in psychological time. The knowledge, the intellectual assimilation Seth demanded, was the key that unlocked the practical ability to consciously participate in non-physical reality.
It's a perfect feedback loop, isn't it?
It is. Learn the theory, increase your conscious focus, and you gain conscious control over the construction of your reality.
Okay, that was an enormous session. Let's try to boil this down and just solidify the main takeaways from session 60.
I think the first and most radical one is just Matter is not what you think it is. It is not continuous, it's not solid, it's a spontaneous, instantaneous flow of energy.
And it's completely replacing itself every fraction of a second, following an underlying psychic blueprint.
Second, aging and decay are not physical. They're not material wear and tear. They are an illusion created when that psychic pattern, which is maintained by our focus, starts to weaken and blur.
Which leads to these progressively less perfect recreations. The decay is energetic, not material.
And third, consciousness is the architect. It's the power source. Our identity, our continuity, it doesn't come from our physical bodies. It comes from the continuity of our purposeful psychic energy that's constantly maintaining the pattern of our form.
And all living things are required participants in this cooperative project to sustain reality.
The bottom line is, we are actively, though mostly unconsciously, thinking our reality into existence in every single moment.
This is such foundational material. The complexity of these ideas, spontaneous, instantaneous, value fulfillment, it really requires a much deeper immersion than we can give it in one deep dive.
Absolutely. We really strongly encourage you, the listener, to go and study the source material for yourself.
And to do that, we want to give full credit to the original source, which is the Seth material and the publisher New Awareness Network. This is where you'll find these ideas laid out in their complete, stunning, original detail.
You can find all of these essential books, including the early sessions, and a ton of other resources that build on this foundation. Just visit the New Awareness Network website and their bookstore at sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
It's a whole life's work. Go and explore the full context.
So we've established that your physical body is constantly being replaced. It's new spontaneous material, and it's following an energetic blueprint that is maintained by your own focused psychic energy.
And that focus is what dictates whether your body appears young and healthy or old and deteriorating.
So if deterioration is just a weakening or a blurring of that pattern, what would happen if you could learn to consciously disregard the collective belief in aging?
If you could ignore the collective psychic pattern that says your body absolutely must fail.
And instead, you dedicate your conscious psychic energy to strengthening and refining your own personal blueprint.
What kind of longevity or vitality or even structural perfection could you achieve if you could consciously maintain the clarity of your pattern so that it never blurred?
To ensure that every single instantaneous recreation was perfectly new, guided by your own intentional, focused value fulfillment. The entire concept of physical limitation might just be a pattern that you are unconsciously allowing to blur.
Think about the power of that realization.
What blueprint are you drawing for yourself right now?
Ponder that until our next deep dive. Good night.